Okay. Hey, y'all. Welcome. My name is Elizabeth Atwell. I live in hot Durham, North Carolina. I work for the Wallace Center, and I co-facilitate this community of practice alongside my amazing colleagues, Melanie Edwards and Ellie Baumstein, as well as our good friends in this work, Ava Aguadello, Farm Fresh Rhode Island, and Andy Olive with Fresh Approach in California. So for anyone that's new, if this is your first Farm to Food Assistance Community of Practice call, welcome. We hope that you will introduce yourself in the chat. I'm going to start with a super quick overview of what this community of practice is. So we started this community last fall as a place for folks like you who are working in various capacities in what we're calling farm to food assistance value chains, to meet and to connect. So when we say farm to food assistance, we mean value chains that build market opportunities for local farmers by helping them to sell to food assistance programs at a fair price. And food assistance programs encompass a really wide array of initiatives that include large-scale food banks to tiny local mutual aid efforts, right? But they all, regardless of shape or size, help the approximately 1 in 10 Americans experiencing food insecurity to have access to food for free. So as you all probably have seen firsthand, these farm to food assistance programs experienced really massive explosion during COVID when we were faced with these intersecting crises of billowing food insecurity at the same time that many farmers were losing their markets even overnight. This field received pretty huge investment last year when USDA rolled out its local food purchase assistance program, and that is what we're going to be focusing on today. So since we started last fall, this group has grown to about 450 people. So if you ever feel like you're feeling lonely or isolated in this work, remember you are not alone. There's many, many people out there that are working hard and facing some of the same challenges and opportunities that you are. So to address those challenges and opportunities, we meet monthly, and this is a place where we discuss different topics each month. And we try to connect and build relationships with one another, share information and resources, lift up really good ideas and promising models, and also work through common challenges. This community practice is facilitated through the Food Systems Leadership Network. So before we get into our conversation today, as always, we're going to take just a moment to look at the FSLN Cultural Agreement. So Mel, if you'll go to the next slide. So if you've been coming to these calls for a while, you've seen these a bunch of times, I'm not going to read them out loud, but just going to take a moment, invite you to read through these. And if one really speaks to you today, please share it in the chat. Meet each other where we are. Listening is participating. Thanks, Susan. Grace and curiosity. Giving grace. Collective wisdom. That's going to be the one I'm going to uphold too. We have a lot we can learn from each other, and that's what this space is all about. Okay, so next slide. So for the last year or so, our team at the Wallace Center has been hustling to research the USDA LFPA program. And we just published this shiny new report highlighting the findings of all of this research. I want to say right off the bat that this report was a hugely collaborative effort, and many of you and the conversations that we've had right here in this community of practice informed the report. So thank you to everyone who gave their time and responses and input. I really hope that we did you justice. So if you haven't gotten a chance to check out the report, please do. We will share the link in the chat. And we'll also share the link to a webinar where we went over key findings. And in this webinar, you can also hear some voices of some of the really awesome people that are implementing LFPA on the ground. We know that in many places, LFPA is really just now getting started. In a few places, it hasn't even started yet. I feel you, California. But the reason that we hustled to get this report out so quickly is because right now the Farm Bill is being written as we speak. And we thought it was really important to lift up this program in hopes of getting it included in this Farm Bill. As you likely know, LFPA is currently slated to end shortly after it's begun. It's a 2 to 3 year funded program. We really don't want that to happen. We want to see LFPA continued into the future. And in fact, for more USDA programs to look at some of the incredible values-based procurement models that many of you are developing through this program and see how they could be applied to other USDA procurement programs. So while there is a lot of support for LFPA within USDA, we know that it's going to take an act of Congress for this program to continue, which means we need to get it included in this Farm Bill. So with that in mind, we've been working to build interest and to build momentum for LFPA's inclusion in the 2023 Farm Bill. And in a little bit, we'll get into detail about what we, with the help of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, the Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative, and several other awesome partners have been doing to advocate for this program within USDA and to Congress. But we're holding this meeting here today because we know that in order for LFPA to get in the Farm Bill, we need all of your help. We need everyone working on LFPA to engage your members of Congress to make sure that they hear about this program, that they hear about what's working really well, that they hear about impacts, but also about what needs to be changed or fixed or improved. So we want to empower you with the information and tools and resources that you need to advocate for this program. And that's what we aim to do today. So how this is going to go is in just a moment, I'm going to hand things over to Hannah Quigley, who's the NSAC policy specialist. And she's going to give an overview of where things stand with the 2023 Farm Bill. I'll then give a quick rundown of actions that we at the Wallace Center have been taking to promote this report and to advocate around LFPA. Then our friend in this work, Katherine Miller, who is a policy advisor to the Wallace Center, is going to give a short and sweet training on how to engage in your own advocacy with your elected officials, during which you're going to have time to work on developing and practicing your own messaging. And finally, we'll close out with sharing some action steps to take next. So for now, I'm going to hand things over to Hannah.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks everybody for having me. As Elizabeth said, my name is Hannah Quigley. I'm a policy specialist with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. We are a grassroots member-based organization with over 130 members across the nation. A few of you are on this call today. And I cover topic areas around food access, urban agriculture, rural development, and local and regional foods. So we'll dig in together here in a moment. But if we want to first launch a poll, Melanie, to give me, this is just so that I can get a better idea of how much of an overview I should give about what the Farm Bill is, and try to right size the approach and overview so that I'm not boring you, but also that you feel well equipped for the rest of this presentation.
Okay, I cannot launch the poll because someone else is also logged in. Susan, can you see if you can launch the poll from your login? No?
No, it doesn't look like I'm a co-host.
Don't worry, we're good. Okay, do you want to, if folks are on camera, we're going to do 1 to 4 kind of results with your hands, if that works. So I'll walk through all the 1 to 4 options right quick. Number 1, you'll hold up one finger if this is the first time you've ever heard about the Farm Bill. Oh, wait, we got a poll. Sorry. All right, great, good. This will be faster. Cool. Awesome. Well, look, then this is great. I will breeze through our little bit of introductory about the Farm Bill. So that's awesome. if we want to pull back up the slides then, and we will just jump right in. So as you all know, then this is a piece of legislation that is reauthorized about every 5 years. And so this year is the year that we hope to get the job done. We won't go over, what it is that all of the programs that are funded from the Farm Bill, because that would take us forever. But as most of you know, it covers programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, crop insurance, agricultural research, and a lot more other programs. But the vast majority of the Farm Bill pays for SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, while the other quarter pays for, all the other kind of on-farm programming. And it's a really important piece of legislation because it has traditionally been very bipartisan, because it supports the needs of both urban and rural communities. And, if you've been following it over the years, there have been various attempts to try to sort of like break apart the bill in order to separate those two, but it's very intentionally kept in this way so that we can work together holistically for our food and farm policy across the nation. All right, if you want to go to the next slide. So just a little bit, about how specifically the process of writing the Farm Bill, again, just high level. It is written by a smaller subgroup of congressional members. So that is going to be the House and the Senate Agricultural Committee members. They will each write their own respective versions of the bill. So if you've been through a Farm Bill before, you'll remember, a lot of conversation about the House version versus the Senate version and how different they may be and how similar they may be. So those different bills will go through and they're passed, in each chamber. And then you will create a conference committee that has the task of going through and creating one singular bill. And then that one singular bill will go back to each House and Senate for a vote before it goes to the president's desk for a signature. And so where we are right now in the Farm Bill is still up here at the tippy top of this diagram. Both of the House and the Senate committees, agricultural committees, are very actively writing the Farm Bill. The Senate is going to likely wrap up the majority of their writing by the end of this month. The House is a little bit further behind. And so we might not see, bill text from them until earlier into the fall. But it's still very much that they are both actively writing it. So it is, of course, on top of everyone's mind. And so for us, what that means right now is just thinking about the fact that Congress just returned from July recess. They've got a couple more weeks before they break again for August recess. So it's a big crunch work period in DC. And it's a great opportunity then to connect with your members of Congress to share about your LFPA program and the impact it's having in your community so that it's fresh of their minds when, they may go into writing elements of the Farm Bill. Elizabeth's going to share a little bit more about ways that we've been supporting advocating for LFPA in DC and ways that you can keep engaging on that topic too in your own hometown. But to give you a little bit better of an idea of kind of where we are with values-based procurement as a whole in DC, Melanie, if you want to go to the next slide. I've had, since earlier this year, I've had a lot of conversations with congressional offices, and there are plenty of people that understand the importance of procuring foods from our local farmers and getting them directly into the hands of food insecure families. So it's definitely not a foreign concept. There is a lot of interest and support for it. However, there's a lot of different ways that offices are imagining how to go about this. So just kind of high level. And so some of these things, may feel more familiar than others, but there are obviously ways you could structure this as like a competitive award program. It could be specific set-asides of local procurement in the larger overall procurement that the federal government is doing through AMS commodity procurement. Some other kind of set-asides we've seen before is like on specific elements around worker welfare or meat procurement. Another option would be something like a block grant. So it's kind of a similar structure to LFPA in the sense that states were given a very specific amount of funding based on a formula of consideration of the unique kind of characteristics in the state. And then another big, very, very big way would be redefining the way, that USDA does procurement as a whole. So reconsidering the way that we consider best value to include other metrics of value that are not just lowest cost. I'm going to go to the next slide. And so just to give you an idea, of where particularly states where we've already heard a lot of interest. Obviously, I've not talked to every congressional member. So this is not a complete list by any means. So, if you've already had really good, promising conversations with your member of Congress, you may want to share that later in the call. But this is a kind of short list. So take a look and see, if you live in one of these states, then you already have a more opportune moment to connect with your member of Congress because they've already expressed in some way an interest in kind of continuing this really intentional focus on local procurement. So Elizabeth, you want to tell us a little bit more about what we've been up to?
Yeah, and thanks, Hannah. We've been busy. So Mel, if you'll go to the next slide. So in case you haven't seen it, we published this report about 3 weeks ago, and this report is the culmination of a really extensive research effort led by our team with support from Duke World Food Policy Center, an incredible team of partners and advisors. Because LFPA is so new, we decided to focus our research on initial impact. So what's really working, what are opportunities for improvement, and what are recommendations for how those improvements could be enacted. So the full report, for those of you that want to really get into it, as well as an executive summary for if you're a little more pressed on time, are both available on the wallacecenter.com or .org. And if one of my colleagues could be sure to just drop the link in the chat, that'd be great. So I don't remember much that I learned in middle school, but I do remember that the final step of the scientific method is share your results with the world. And that is what we've been trying to do in a lot of different ways for the past several weeks. So next slide. So the very first thing that we did was to share this report to USDA, acknowledging that this is their program and also to honor and respect the truly incredible work done by the team at AMS Commodity Procurement to establish and implement this brand new one-of-a-kind program. And I know the program isn't perfect, and I've spoken to a lot of people that are dealing with all kinds of challenges, but I do just want to continue to applaud the team at USDA because without them, this wouldn't exist at all. So on the very day that the report was publicly released, our team presented to key members at USDA. This meeting was really well attended and very well received, and spoke to, I think, USDA's general excitement about this program. Next, we hosted a national webinar highlighting key findings of this report. Again, we'll make sure to share the link to that in the chat. And if you don't have time to read the whole report, I highly suggest you put on this webinar while you're making dinner or out walking the dog. It's a great way to get a quick overview of what's in the report. And this Monday, we presented on a congressional briefing that was organized by Hannah and NSAC. This briefing was attended by House and Ag Committee staffers. And our major goal in this briefing was to make them aware of this program. I'm seeing in the chat, Senator Booker's office saying they're not aware of this program, right? We want to let people know it exists and that we think it's awesome and advocate that they take actions to include it in the Farm Bill. And I'll note that we've also been having a few direct meetings with key Ag Committee staffers and are planning more of those in the coming weeks. On every single presentation we have done about this report, we have brought in folks implementing this program to speak firsthand about their experiences. In fact, we always budgeted time so that they were speaking more than we were about this report. So gonna name them out loud. Major shout out to Schaefer Ridgeway, Gazelle Bruskowitz from Iowa, Dion Washington in Arizona, Mary Green of the Spirit Lake Tribe, Rachel Terry of Common Market, Alyssa Pearson of the New Mexico Department of Ag, Manny Inicias of Trilogy Beef in New Mexico, Buck Jones of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Initiative, and Jonna Lee Squeox of Yakama Nation. Each one of these people was able to really bring to life their stories about the impacts of this program and their own recommendations about how it could be improved. So they really brought to life the findings of this report. And I cannot overstate the importance of this. So as you think about how to highlight and present about your own program, be sure wherever you can to bring in the voices of the farmers and the businesses that this program is impacting, as well as the voices of folks who are benefiting from and being fed by this program. A personal story is almost always going to speak louder than facts or statistics. And always, if you can, pay people an honoraria for their time, particularly farmers who have to really move through hell and high water to take any time away from their farms right now. So those calls were all calls that we hosted, but we've also been trying to show up and give high-level overviews to other coalitions and other networks, such as the NSAC Coalition or the Good Food Purchasing Policy Coalition. And that's just a good reminder to lean into your existing networks and partnerships to build awareness and motivation. We've also shared this report out widely. We emailed it out through our newsletter. We sent it directly to key partners and other networks, and we blasted it across almost every listserv that we're a part of. So apologies if you've gotten like 4 emails about this. Next slide. So at the same time that this was going on, we really leaned into social media. We worked as a team to first develop our messaging about the report. And then we used this to create social media posts that reflected that messaging. We promoted it on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We don't TikTok, but we would have if we did. Next slide. We developed a press release. We sent this out to media contacts. And we also worked hard with partners to cross-promote this. So next slide. Here, you can see a blog post by NSAC, a Facebook post by the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. And we're not stopping here. So towards the end of this call, I'm going to talk about some of our next steps. But right now, in the meantime, we really hope to get y'all involved to take actions, both small, like tweeting, and large, like reaching out directly to your members of Congress to advocate for your programs and its continuation, and also for the changes that you want to see. So now I want to hand things back over to Hannah and then to Katherine to talk about how to do that.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I cannot echo enough the sentiment that members of Congress and their staff would so much rather prefer to hear from you all and individuals on the ground that are implementing this daily, that have that direct experience, more than someone like me. You know, someone who I am, of course, I'm there and I'm helpful because I can actually pull a lot of sentiments from a wide audience and share what is a high priority across, multiple states to a member. And I can be, quick to respond because of the DC rush. But the thing that really matters is your voice and your perspective, and them getting to see their own district or the state through your eyes. So LFPA way better than I do. And as Elizabeth said, even through the research that's provided through the Wallace Center. And so you can speak to the way that it impacts in your community, and also the ways that it can change and be better to meet the needs of your specific region. So as we mentioned, it's a good time to connect now. And that connection can look a lot of different ways, which I know Katherine will walk us through in a bit more detail. It can be as simple as tweeting at your member of Congress. Honestly, you will probably get a retweet, especially if you're thanking them or you're shouting out the program in your state. And that's a really fun way to connect. You can, send images along of something that's going on in your area that's important. Never, ever, ever overlook the impact of just talking about the good work that you do and sharing that with them, because they like to highlight that as well. You may go a step further and reach out to your member of Congress and invite them to actually come to, your food hub, your farm, the food pantry that you're working. So you can invite them to do a variety of those things. And August is obviously a great time for them because they'll be in the hometown or in the district, and they'll be able to come out more frequently. And then, of course, you can send a letter and or an email and things like that as well. Just a really quick clarifier that you actually have, if you are, housed in a nonprofit, a 501c3, and you're like, oh, I really wish I could do a lot of these things, but I can't because I work at a nonprofit. That is not true. There's a lot of flexibility and actually a very generous amount of direct lobbying that staff members of a 501c3 can do. I will share in a moment 2 different articles in the chat for you all to dig in more. But basically, there are different ways that your organization, just if active lobbying is a daily part of your organization's work, then you probably have a specific way that you elect and file, your various tax documents to the IRS to demonstrate that lobbying. But otherwise, again, it's just like an assumed very small amount, and it's not a large amount of your actual day-to-day activity. And so you have a generous amount that you can do. But again, I will share those so you don't take my word for it. And there's a lot of free consultation online as well. So we'll share those tools momentarily with you all. And now I will turn it over to Katherine.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, everybody. How's everybody? Can I just see, for those who have their camera on, just an indication of how you're doing right at this moment? Little thumbs up, little waving, some hand motion. This is the stage in the training where I'd ask you to get up and move around a little, right? Get your body moving after lunch. Yes, Megan, I love it. It's always hard to sit and listen. I am a policy advisor to the Wallace Center. I also have a company called Table 81, and I work with a variety of nonprofits, foundations, and socially responsible businesses. We do a lot of trainings on message and advocacy, message development and policy advocacy in the US, but also around the globe. And I was really excited to give you a little snippet of what a longer training would be, just to talk a little bit about your voice and how it matters, why it matters, a little glimpse into the magic of social media. And then we're going to do an exercise where we're going to talk about effective messaging, and you're going to spend a little time writing. And then a few of you will have the opportunity to share some messages that you might write. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, thanks. So this is just a really basic slide, right? There are really 5 steps to every effective advocacy piece, right? And there's even a 6th, which as I always use it as the happy sauce on the dish, which is one, we always want to prepare for these interactions, right? We take the time to think about what we're going to say, why we're going to meet with the people we're going to meet with, right? What it is we want to do, what is it we want to accomplish. So we actually do have to take some time and center ourselves and prepare. We want to connect not only with the issues, but the people, and even the people within our own community before we go out into this world of advocacy. When one, you can always see what other people are doing. You get to know what's happening, and you get to learn different perspectives. 3, we want to use advocacy as both an opportunity to educate ourselves. So a lot of active listening, what are the circumstances that we're trying to create for somebody to make the decisions it's making, but also to help educate and inform the people that we're trying to reach. We always want to have an ask. Never leave any meeting, any interaction with a member of Congress or their staff or a reporter or a donor or anyone without an actual ask at the end, whether that's to help support a piece of legislation, whether that's to support appropriations, right? The ask is really important. We also always want to follow up, right? When we've finished an advocacy activity, whether it's even a tweet or a retweet, or whether it's a meeting request, or whether you've had the meeting, whether it's a letter to the editor, there's always a follow-up. And then the last, which is really inherent in all of this, is throughout this process, you always want to say thank you. Right? Members of Congress and their staffs rarely hear the words thank you. So please make sure that you do that. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, thanks, Mel. Hannah referenced this, as did Elizabeth. Personalized contact is really the way to reach members of Congress and their staffs, and any really policymaker, whether it be an administrator at USDA. A survey was done related to the effectiveness of different types of contact. Certainly the number one way to do it is an in-person visit with a constituent, right? That's not always possible, but that is the thing that is the most persuasive, the most effective. And second to that is constituents representing other constituents, right? So remembering that when you walk into that room, you're not walking into that room alone. You're walking into that room with the members of your organization, people from your community, the stories of those that join you in this ask. There's things like individual postage, actual letters, like Congress still gets letters, individual email messages, individual phone calls. When I say individualized, personalized, right? We used to, within advocacy, have these things, these big moves to, oh, we get 1 million petition signatures, or we get 1 million signers of this thing. And that isn't always it doesn't always have the most impact, right? Because it feels members' offices are becoming more sophisticated about whether that stuff is canned. So the more we can take personalizing what we're asking for, the more we can put it in a context of how it impacts us, our community, our friends, our family, the organizations that we work for and with, is really helpful. Comments on social media. This is, it seems funny to say this, but it's still a relatively new form of communicating with members of Congress. All 435 members of the House and all 100 Senate offices and all the committee offices are now on Twitter. Some are on Instagram, some are on this new platform Threads, but they are monitoring it. And I'll show you some numbers on that in just a second. Lobbyists, editorial endorsements, town halls, all of those are strong forms of communication, but the ones with the black bars are the most effective, the most persuasive. If we go to the next slide, you are also at the center of this tremendous network. So when we think about that, a constituent representing other constituents, or stories that you could bring, that network of influence that you have, right? So whether it's customers at your business, whether it's the employees, whether it's media who follows you, other advocates in your circle, I always want people to take that more expansive view of advocacy. It's not just you, it's you at the center of a table with all the others that you represent. And that's something that you also bring into social media. And you would just go to the next slide. Thanks, Mel, is those communities, whether that's the people you follow or the people that follow you. These are still the 4 most prevalent platforms for advocacy on social. Facebook, certainly because they allow longer form posts. Twitter, because they allow immediate reaction to news and news sharing, and that's actually still where most journalists are. Snapchat is actually a millennial and Gen Z, still an advocacy platform, lots of immediate pictures, sharing, reactions, and there are people that are sort of taking the pulse of that continuously. And then Instagram, and then Instagram's new platform called Threads, which is moving into the Twitter territory. But these are sort of the 4 biggest platforms. LinkedIn, a lot of organizations use it, and it's certainly an effective piece. But when I'm thinking about where people are, these are the 4 most popular channels. We go to the next slide. Social media, one of the things that makes it great is it's free, right? You can certainly have ads and sponsorship, but the interaction, and it's not free for the people who do it in your organizations, like the social media managers that you have, but it is a free platform. You don't necessarily have to pay to use it. And some survey work done with congressional staff, that sort of ridiculous stat, right? Like the almost perfect stat of 97% of congressional staff actually review comments on social networks. And 80% of them pay attention when there are 10 or 30 similar posts on social media, when they start to see the same thing, a retweet, a sharing, or a group of people who are using the same hashtag, right? So again, that network that you bring into this. And then there's the staff that reported that when a member of Congress has not arrived at a firm decision on an issue, multiple constituents affiliated with a specific group or cause had an impact on that decision. Maybe that seems common sense, but it's really this idea of the more people that you can bring a similar message will be more effective than a sort of one-off or one-person effort. And then, multiple constituents from a specific group, right? So if you have a bunch of people who live in a specific congressional district or live in a specific state, really getting together and utilize and harnessing their voice together is really tremendously effective. Just go to the next slide and we'll take a quick look at some sample tweets related to the Farm Bill. So as Hannah talked about, the Farm Bill every couple of years, we're in that reauthorization period now, considering ways to have folks as they're negotiating and considering different aspects of the Farm Bill to consider local procurement and programs like LFPA. These are some sample tweets, right, that are really focused on SNAP and hunger, right? But did you know the hashtag Farm Bill is really a food bill? Millions of families are in danger of losing their life-saving SNAP benefits. Those types of words, the types of hashtags that you use, the types of tagging that you use will all help your social media posts get noticed. If we go to the next one, I'll just show the quick anatomy of a tweet. So, most tweets have this, most successful tweets really have the same sort of components, right? So you have maybe multiple hashtags that will help it get noticed. You tag other folks. In this case, this was a more partisan tweet. They tagged the House Republicans. You can expand the tweet to look at sort of, can you retweet it? Will you reply? Can you favorite it? This type of piece, and we can go into this on when we have a much longer call someday about training, we can go into this, but just wanted to show you that there are some components to tweets that make them more successful and make it possible for them to be picked up. You go to the next slide. Perfect. So we're going to get into sort of message development, and then you guys are going to have a quick opportunity to write down a sample message that you might use, whether it be in a tweet or a letter to the editor or in a meeting request to a member of Congress or an invitation to invite them to a town hall or a meeting with you and others. And it really is that first and foremost, we want to emphasize that we are constituents in this. We want to always contextualize it into the type of person that we are, right? We're a small business owner, we're a community leader, we're a farmer, we're a tribal leader, we're an NGO executive director, whatever that qualifying, those things that are kind of bring in your own expertise and start to set the stage for your own experience are really important. And it's why your voice matters in this, right? Members of Congress want to hear from the people closest to them. You want to go to the next slide? There is a theory of persuasion related to advocacy, and it's also, it works in advocacy for policy and it works in advocacy for negotiations of salary exchanges, right? The principles are essentially the same. What is it that you want, right? You want a sponsorship of a bill, you want more money for a program, you want a more open program, whatever it is you want, you have to figure out who can give it to you, who can make it happen. Is it a member of Congress? Is it a USDA administrator? Is it a local LFPA contact, right? And then what is it they want out of this, right? Is that they want recognition? Is that they want to be seen as helpful? Is that, right? So you have to think about the personal motivations there, and then who can give that to them and who can reinforce that for them. So do they want public recognition? So is it media? Is it they want to be seen as helpful to the community? So they want a good reputation, right? When we think about that theory of persuasion, Dr. Wade Nobles, who's a great, a great social justice pioneer, really thinks about that. How do we create the circumstances to help people make the decisions that we need them to make? And these are the 4 principles that he always asks in a lot of his work and his trainings. We go to the next slide. And I'm flying through this, and I will stop sort of verbal vomiting on you in just a minute, but and we will make all these slides available to you. But one thing that I also always want to remind people when they go into advocacy is that actually politicians are people too. We sometimes think of that, we're always like, oh, they work for us, or they aren't listening, or they're stupid, or they're this, or they're that. But they are people. And when we think about that, there's oftentimes some fundamental truth that advocates hate, right? Which is the lawmaker's decision that they are making at that particular moment is rational. It may only be rational to them, but it is rational to someone, to them, right? And so we have to be cognizant of that. It's kind of goes to our active listening and some of the other skills that we need in advocacy. And it's also not your job or our job as advocates to force them to do anything. We are not going to achieve the results that we want by finger pointing or arguing or trying to force them to listen to us, right? It is really, we have to create a condition where they see what we want as the most rational course of action, right? The thing that is most obvious to them. And this next slide has a lot of the reasons why they might choose to do these things that we reinforce when we talk about messages, right? Reasons why they make decisions. It fits their ideology for their party. It fits the facts as they know them. It fits the makeup of the district in which they live or the community in which they live. It serves their ambition as part of their public profile. You see the word maverick there. You know, some, whether they be career folks in agencies or on Capitol Hill, or whether they be elected members themselves, right? There is this desire to fit the profile of which I see myself. Am I a maverick? Am I a leader? Am I unique? Am I individual? So we have to think about that. Is there affinity? Are we fitting what we're doing along the lines of our like-minded colleagues? Like, are we aligned with people? Is there something that is propelling momentum? It's why we get so, once you get a certain number of co-sponsors on a bill, more co-sponsors start to come, right? Because people don't want to be sort of left behind or not part of the group. There is this world of elite persuasion, lobbyists, media experts, right? That definitely impacts they definitely whispering the ear, but your voice and the voice of advocates can counterbalance that. Is it consistent, right? No one wants to be a flip-flopper. No one wants to be called out for breaking a campaign promise or being a liar, right? So the consistency matters. And that goes back to one of those original principles about good advocacy, right? Is that we need to be prepared. So you need to know some of these things when you're going into these relationships. Does it match their personal experience, and does it fit into the bigger context of what they want to do? So, I'm throwing a lot at you, but when we think about this and when we think about going into advocacy and we're starting to build our message, which we're about to go into, these are some of the things that we really need to think about. So the next slide is just a really quick example of a frame for messaging that I want everybody to think about, which is, so oftentimes as advocates, we start with the facts. Like, let me tell you the facts. We, this much money created this many jobs, and it did this thing. And that is great, and it can be effective, but it's more effective if you can create a message that also touches on how people want to be involved or are involved in a process. Are you tugging on a sort of emotional heartstring with somebody? And at the end of the day, is it appealing to their own aspirations, their own hopes and values? And the more that you can incorporate each of these pieces of a message into to what you're trying to say, the higher the engagement will be, the more response that you'll get. If you go to the next slide, there's also just some qualities of a strong message, and we're going to give you these things in a workbook, which I'll put the link in the chat, right? When you're thinking about language, right, and you're thinking about a story you want to tell, can you create an emotional reaction? Like, can people actually feel the words that you're talking about? Is it truthful? Is it easily understood, right? So are you focusing on one fact or one point and not trying to get all convoluted or explain it? Because the more facts that we give somebody, the more it gets, our brains are only kind of predisposed to be able to process a few things at a time. And so if we start throwing all the facts at somebody, it gets them really confused. So is it truthfully, is it easily understood? We want to use really colorful language so that you start to see it, right? Buck had a great piece in his testimony the other day about the arrow. And if you shot an arrow in any direction, right, what the impacts of that you would see related to local food purchasing and procurement and the impacts of that. It was just great, that imagery of the arrow being shot across land was really powerful and stayed with a number of people, right? Will people want to repeat what you've said? So do you make the language easy for them to say, right? Not necessarily complicated, not super long words, simple words and phrases so that it's easy to repeat, easy to use. And does it actually inspire you to do something? Like, is there an ask in it, or does it create a sense of urgency in you? So these are some qualities of a strong message. The last two slides that we'll go to, is this a sort of a message box? Many of you may have seen this if you've done a media training or a message training before, right? There's 4 quadrants and you fill them up. Well, we like to think about this as, why are you speaking up, right? Which is an aspirational, how is this appealing to your hopes and dreams? What do you actually need them to do? What's the social aspect? You need them to co-sponsor something? Do you need them to vote a certain way? Do you need them to speak out a certain way? Do you need to participate in a town hall? Like, what is the social aspect of this message that you're trying to convey? Why does it matter? Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to your community? That is really the emotional side. Is it urgent? Is it it's a life imperative? Does it make you angry, right? So why does it matter to you? And like the short story in that. And then within the context of the work that you guys will be doing within LFPA, right? What are the functional messages that you want to convey? What are those number of jobs? What is that amount of money? What is that number of folks in the community that are benefiting from this? And then the very last piece of this, and again, I'm doing this in like 12 minutes, what we would normally spend a half a day on. So we will share all this with you, and we can go into the exercise in a second. But as you're writing your message, I want you to think about remembering the C3s, right? It's concise. I want you to keep it short. We're going to give you about 10 minutes. But also think about it as length. A tweet is only 240 characters. A letter to the editor can only be 150 words, right? You're only going to get 10 or 15 minutes or 5 minutes in the case of the congressional hearing the other day, the congressional briefing the other day, right? And that it means that you have to make sure that what you want to say is concise. It needs to be colorful. So you want to use that language that is memorable and helps paint that picture, as I said, that arrow, right? Buck also used the example of the salmon in the box and the way the community lit up when he was talking about when they got the salmon in the box. And it was really powerful to hear him describe the looks on the people's faces. And then the confidence, right? You are an expert in this, whether it's whether it is as a business leader, whether it is as a producer, whether it is as a constituent, there's a certain amount of expertise that you bring to this. And so I always want you to remember that. We're gonna give you, how are we doing on time, Ellie? We're right, yeah. So we are gonna give you about 10 minutes to go to the next exercise. To write out a short statement. You're going to do this. We're going to put on a song or two. Maybe we'll make it 8 minutes just because we're running a teeny bit tight. And I want you to write out a short statement about why LFPA matters to you and your community, right? And try and hit these 4 lines. Why are you speaking up? Why does it matter? What do you need them to do? Right? And let's presume our audience is members of Congress or their staffs working on the Farm Bill. And what is it about LFPA you want them to know? I'm going to put into the chat a workbook that you can edit in real time, download and work on your computer that has a couple of the slides so you can refer back to them. And then we'll come back and hopefully 1 or 2, maybe 3 of you will want to share what you wrote. And we can talk about why you wrote what you wrote, some of the things that stuck with you, and also share your story with members of this community. I think they're going to put me in a virtual cubicle. And if you have any questions during that time, the next over the next 8 to 10 minutes while you're doing this exercise, feel free to pop into my virtual cubicle and I'm happy to talk to you there. But sound good? Can I get a thumbs up from folks? Awesome. Can I get some music maybe? We're gonna do music? No, I can hum. There you go. We'll see you in a few. we coming back? Okay, so how was that? Can I get was it hard? Thumbs, like nod? Was it a fun little quick exercise? You wanted like a half hour, like just some thumbs up. I got a couple of thumbs up. Use your emoji of choice or your reaction of choice. Just always, can't really see. There we go, side by side gallery. So there were a couple of great questions in the breakout room, and is it Andrew?
Yes.
Yeah. I used to work for the legislature. Oh, Andrew, you had an interesting question about the aspirational to the concrete. You want to just share your question again? We were talking about it a little.
Yeah, just the place where I'm starting is like food is a love language that we all understand. It's how we take care of one another. And just in a time where there's so much noise and hate and just like divisive messaging happening, I was asking the question of like how can you start at that value that everyone's going to have some kind of experience with and connect it to the ask of like anchor it to how we expand that for folks.
Yeah, no, and it's something about aspirational language. I do this in trainings a lot where I ask everybody to raise their hand. Anybody who wants to end hunger should raise their hand, and everybody raises their hand, right? And then I say, okay, everybody who wants to, give children more fruits and vegetables, raise your hand and keep your hand up, right? And some people will lower their hand. And the more concrete you get to some of the pieces, the more hands go down, right? So aspirations, this big thing that we can all attach to, right? It's food is our universal language. It's the thing that impacts every community. It's the thing we all have to do. It is a great place to start. You can't stay there, right? Because then it's too soft and it doesn't have enough concrete action. So that nice balance of food is our universal language. Food is the thing that helps our communities thrive. Food is this, and LFPA is a great example of X, Y, and Z, right? Or we have found ways to help values stay within the community or help our communities grow using LFPA. The more you can move there is great, but it's hard, right? It's a hard balance, and asking you to do it 8 minutes is even harder. But I want you to just always think about what I loved, Andrew, about your starting there is that is absolutely where people can start, right? Food is a common thread. When you're meeting with a member of Congress, I often start conversations around food about like, oh, what did you have for dinner last night? Right? When I have the opportunity to have that conversation in person, or what's your favorite food, or, what's the thing that's produced most in your district? Because even getting them in that mindset of food is great, right? Yes, in many tribal creation stories. Yeah. Buck, I feel like you could do my job for me. Right? Other questions that came up? Melinda, you have your hand up.
One of the questions that came up for me is I guess it's more of a statement, but there is a place for negative bias too, like negative bias of the human brain, where I don't know. I've always personally figured that there's enough positivity in these things. Sorry, my baby's giggling in the background.
Talk about positivity.
Yeah. But there isn't like a reality check. And reality checks are also good. And when I worked for an institution of higher education, my theory was if I wasn't making everybody in the room gasp like I just had whipped out a pistol in an open meeting, I wasn't doing my job. So there is also room for that. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there and also see what everybody else or what you thought, Katherine. Yeah, no, I think some of the language you're talking about, some of the creating urgency in the room is some of the most important thing that we can do, right? So how do you, is that a stunning fact, right? Is that a amazing, is that a
hard story to hear, right? Is it something that's going to make them remember and either attach to the urgency or attach to the seriousness of the problem, right? Is incredibly important because it will create a momentum for action, right? People will be motivated to do something. And so I think you can do that within the urgency. I also, another one of somebody else in the room asked about starting from a sort of, do you start from problems or do you start from solutions? I tend to think that within the short time frame that you either have for a letter to the editor or even a short meeting with members of Congress or their staffs or USDA administrators, that we have to figure out how to talk about what we're talking about as a solution, because more problems for them to solve are not the thing that we're trying to do, right? But you can present a solution as an answer to a problem, right? So you can say something in terms of like LFPA helps more money stay in our community, right? It helps more jobs get created, or it helps us achieve more culturally appropriate meals, or it helps us bring things to people. And you've answered the problem with the solution right there, right? If you can do that well. Yeah, you definitely want them to see you as a solution too, right? You are a resource to them. You are an expert, you're a validator, you are the person carrying the other stories in. So I love that point too, Hannah. Yeah. Other questions or considerations? No, I know this is a lot in a really short period of time, but we'll share the slides with you and we'll share the workbook with you. And also, Elizabeth, we can share my email with folks if folks have questions or follow up. I'm always happy to look at things. We did some short prep with the speakers for the congressional briefing the other day. And so if there's other opportunities like that, if I'm happy to help as I can. I know, concise. I have a rule of thumb that is 30 seconds is roughly 76 words, depending on how fast you talk, right? So if you have 5 minutes, you have about 250 words, right? So sometimes for me, form helps with function, right? So I will often put at the top of my screen, like I have 3 minutes, that's X many words, and that just forces the discipline, right? And I have to be very economical with my words or choose them. So that's just a little tool. So yeah. Yes, broadband in the Farm Bill. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in the chat. I hope you can capture the chat too. Well, thank you for the opportunity to kind of posit this in your brain, and I look forward to seeing what you guys all do with it. Elizabeth?
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. That was your fount of knowledge. I just so appreciate you taking all of these big ideas and breaking them down in a really digestible way. I hope that this exercise was a good step for y'all to just take, 10 minutes to start to craft out a message. And this is just one step. So now we want to talk about what are next steps. How can we translate these messages that we've been developing into action? So I shared some of what the Wallace Center has done, and there's a lot that you can do. If you have a Twitter, if you have a Facebook, if you have an Instagram, post about it. Post a photo, get permission, but go out and take some photos of the farms, of the businesses, of the people getting food, and share that. Post about your program. Catherine provided some really good tips on how to be concise and colorful, and even how to construct a tweet, which is definitely something I don't know how to do. Also, it's just a good reminder, in organizing, I think we all know it's important to engage young people. So I, as a Luddite that don't know how to use social media, do know that there's a ton of people that are in college, even in high school, that want to get involved and sometimes don't know how. And that's a really easy way you can bring young people into your actions. You can write a letter to the editor, and we will share a media piece that we wrote And also, I should note, as one of the follow-ups to this, we're also going to share this really clutch list of all MOC's Twitter handles. So for those of you that are tweeters, Katherine has pulled that together. So we'll share that as a follow-up to this call. But you can go a lot further. Members of Congress are on recess right now, so it's a really good time to say, hey, come out and see it in action. We'd love to host you. We'd love for you to come see why we think this program is so important. But now and later, you can also show up to them. You can request to meet in person. And I know that can sound really intimidating. I used to think that that was for professional lobbyists. That wasn't for just a lay person like myself. And that's not true. Our whole democratic system really depends on our participation, in meeting with our members of Congress is our right. And some might even say our obligation. So you can set up a meeting. You can also call or email your members of Congress. And also remember to lean into your key partners. I shared that as part of uplifting this report that we've done, that, you know, it was important for us to hold our own spaces to talk about it and use our own newsletter and our own platforms. But we also reached out to our other partnering networks and our other partners in this work and said, hey, can you help share this? Or can I show up on your call and talk about this? So we all have a lot of partners. We know that the strength of this work depends on the strength of our relationships. So remember to use those relationships here. And finally, talk to the people that are most impacted by this work. Talk to the farmers, talk to the businesses, talk to the value chain coordinators and the food hubs, and maybe you are those people, but there's a lot of others alongside you. We know it takes a huge diversity of partners to make this work. So ask them to engage, and if you have the financial resources to do so, help them to engage. You know, that could be taking the time to say, hey, let's meet. I learned this really cool framework for how to craft your message. Do you want to work on that together? Or to say, hey, we're going to host a call. I'd love to pay you an honorarium for your time to show up. So there's a lot of ways that you can take action. I'm sure there are more that I haven't thought of here, but I'd love to hear from some of y'all in the chat. What's one action you're going to take coming out of this? What's one thing that you would do to make your voice heard? And if a couple of people want to share verbally, you can just come off mute or raise your hand. Haley's going to reach out to local food policy councils and get them to advocate too. That's great. Yes, use that circle of influence. Buck's given the Native Farm Bill Coalition tribal priorities to other colleagues for their conversations with representatives and staff, even if they're not on ag committees. I'm finding that that's helping. Rebecca's going to contact Constituent Services Director for their senator and schedule a meeting. Ava already went to DC last month, met with member of Congress staffers, hasn't followed up, so she's going to send some follow-up emails tomorrow. That's awesome, y'all. Heck yeah. As Katherine shared, just 10 to 30 similar tweets or emails or requests for meetings, that can actually make a change. It can feel, I know that particularly in this political climate, that what is little old me or little old you gonna do? But actually the data shows, right, that actually maybe a lot. So the more that you tweet, the more that you do outreach, the more that you send those follow-up emails, the better chance we have at continuing this program. Okay, so and thanks, Mel. Shout out this is our social media handles. Please follow us. We'll be trying to continue to post updates about this work and about this report there. We are not the most savvy at social media. We also will note that because the Wallace Center is a part of a much larger organization called Winrock International, they are a little bit hamstringed by what kind of things we can post on social media, which means that we really need this network, NSAC, other networks to really take the charge on leading that. But I'll tell a couple of what our next steps are and NSAC's next steps, and Hannah, I'll ask you to back me up here. Like I said, we're not stopping here. We're really excited to see that it feels like there's some momentum here. It actually feels like there's some interest from Congress. It feels like there's a lot of interest from USDA. We think that maybe we can make this happen. So with the help of Hannah and our colleagues at NSAC, we're going to be having multiple meetings with strategic offices on the Hill. Hannah shared a slide earlier of states where there are Congress people that have particular interest in seeing USDA procurement reform or interest in LFPA, but we know there are others we haven't reached yet. So we are figuring this out as we go, but as we get those meetings scheduled, we will be leaning in on this community of practice to reach out to y'all. So if you are in some of those key states, we really hope to get your voice involved in those meetings and in that outreach to those members of Congress. We're also going to be continuing to meet with key leadership at USDA. We're getting a meeting scheduled right now for early August. We know that it's really important for us to be having FaceTime with both political appointees and career staff at USDA and have them be strong advocates for the program. We're going to keep trying to get media attention. So reaching out to media contacts at a bunch of different formats. And finally, and Hannah, you might have to speak to this better than I can, but we're also talking about partnering and supporting NSAC on developing some legislative text. There are several different bills that are kind of in the right direction, but it's definitely a cigarette and no cigar. None of them are quite it. So we might have to lean on NSAC to actually develop the legislative text that we hope to see introduced. Am I forgetting anything, Hannah?
Did an excellent job.
Great. So we're going to keep y'all posted. Stay tuned on this community of practice. It's the best way to stay in touch. Our next meeting is going to be August 10th, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll send a follow-up to this call with the recording, the link to the slides, all the materials that Katherine shared, as well as some other materials. I mentioned that list of congressional Twitter handles, some example social media posts and press release. We really hope that you'll use all of it and stay in touch. Let us know how it's going. Please share this report and let us know how we can best help, because ultimately our goal is to help serve y'all, the people actually doing the work of implementing this program. So thanks for being here. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Katherine. Thank you to my team. I know we've been pulling some really long hours to pull this off. I'm so proud of this report. I'm glad that we can offer it out to y'all. We hope it's a tool, and we'll see you in August. Bye.